The Great Gatsby, Chapter 4. So we'll start with a summary of the chapter. Gatsby visits Nick's house for the first time and talks of his wartime experience. They travel into the city where Gatsby introduces Nick to Mayor Wolfsheim, and Jordan tells Nick about Daisy's past, her brief love affair with Gatsby, and her subsequent marriage to Tom. At the beginning of the chapter, Nick refers to an old timetable containing a list he made in the summer of 1922 of the visitors to Gatsby's backyard, those who paid him subtle tribute of knowing nothing whatever about him. He lists characters whose names bear allusions to animals of various descriptions. Each of these animals carry negative associations and are shown to belong to the power-hungry, parasitical jungle Nick had already outlined in Chapter 3. So some of these animals are horned and masculine in nature, some are characterised by their wily, industrious natures, another distinct group are characterised by their association to fish and pungent smells. Faustina O'Brien also reminds us of the legend of Faust, the character who sold himself to the devil. So in this section, Nick seems to indulge himself a little in wordplay. It's a kind of comic aside. He deviates from his usual poetic prose and seems to take on the style of a novel of manners, exploring the characteristics of a particular class of people and poking fun at them. We looked at the symbolism of cars more generally in Chapter 3. Let's now look at Gatsby's car. It's a Rolls-Royce of a rich cream or yellow colour, yellow being a colour associated in the novel with materialism and false hope. It's described as being swollen here and there in its monstrous length, and like a green leather conservatory. Gatsby's car, then, is more like a home in its proportions, being terraced with a labyrinth of windshields that mirrored a dozen suns. The green of the leather symbolises wealth in its connection to the green dollar, but it's also subtly associated with the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. We're reminded throughout the entire novel that the whole show, the car, the house, the parties, the possessions, all of that exists in order to recapture her. In the car on the way to New York, Gatsby tells Nick about his life. We learn that his possessions don't make him happy. He seems to get no intrinsic pleasure from the collected artefacts around him and seems self-consciously aware of the pretense upon which he's built his public persona. As such, he chokes on his apparent lie to Nick that he was educated at Oxford, and seems burdened by an intense energy. He was never quite still, there was always a tapping foot somewhere or the impatient opening and closing of a hand. He seems to be aware that he could be exposed at any time. Unlike the complacent Tom, who revels luxuriously in the splendour of his mansion, Gatsby seems never to be at ease with himself. Gatsby props up his history with handy objects of authenticity, such as war medals and photographs of his time at Oxford. His stories seem overblown, unrealistic, and tinged with equal measure of fantasy and self-pity. So note the way he keeps referring cryptically to the sad thing that happened to me, and how when the war came he tried very hard to die in order to forget it. These reflections stretch his credibility to the limit, and Nick is left feeling more annoyed than interested in the favour that Gatsby has asked him.